Yeah.
And so,
Well, if you're 25 and you only have 3, you can cut your losses, so to speak. It's like, I'm gonna go do something else.
Right.
You're sitting on that 7-year mark, it's like, man, I better try to.
well,
sell.
I want to talk about longevity too. That's a few items down still,
Right.
but as far as across the board goes,
Got it.
the city was, I think, very bold in coming to the agreement that we came to 2 years ago for the what amounted to a roughly 7-7 for the 2 years, and just kind of. I think it's time to be even bolder, and that's where the 10-10-10 comes in.
And I assume when I see 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5,
That's my way of saying.
October, April,
Right.
October, April,
Right.
October, April.
Our guys, I think to a person, the majority of them very much appreciated the 6-month increases.
Every bump.
It gives you something
bump
to look
every
forward
6
to. It helps create separation between other people hired much later in the calendar year. So we're not adverse to that. I don't know what the city's stance is on continuing that concept, but our guys seem to like it. So we would be perfectly in favor of that. But for the big picture number on it, we're looking for a 10-10-10 for each of the next 3 years, which is of course the largest we can go by law, 3 years. We think when you look around at what other agencies are doing right now, the competition that's out there is fierce, and you've lost, as you noted, we talked about a number of people this past year alone to other careers altogether. So you've got a recruitment problem, every department does, and you've got a retention problem that every department seems to have. And you've got nearby competition in this county that make your job very tough. And I understand that right now, coming up with 10% a year for the next 3 years sounds like 10 years ago, I'd have gotten laughed out of the room at that, but I think now.
Certainly 06 to 12, right?
Right.
Prior to that,
Different
I don't know
environment.
if you'd been laughed out, but it would have been like, oh, that's,
We-
back in
we-
the good old days, we were getting fat raises and giving fat raises, and then there was that lull of time. And we've slowly come out of that, like you said, with the boldness of the 2-year deal we're in. So, listen, the upside of the proposal that, splits the increases like we've been doing the past 4 years, by the way. Like,
Yes, we did that.
the ones
prior.
before that, we did like 2-2, 2-2,
Correct.
and then 3-4, 3-4. It helps the city budget, and then knowing, we absorb, even though we call it 10, it's really, what would that be, 7.5% cost for the fiscal year, which is assumed in the following fiscal year, but that gives us another year, new construction, new tax, things on the roll, so it gives a chance to catch up in the revenue portion of that. So, yeah, I understand the proposal. As you know, we don't typically get our numbers, if you will, from the property appraiser and the tax collector until July 1st. So we don't know what the property values are doing. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to look around town and see the new buildings popping up and the new subdivisions, and a lot of those are on the tax rolls as of now. Some will be on the following year, depending on when they got their CO. So.
Well, and I can tell you too, and I don't think it's any big surprise, that we're gonna go up this year significantly.
Let's hope, right?
The values have been off the charts the last year. And what everyone was afraid would be a devastating regression because of COVID has actually worked the other way, because you have all these people in bigger cities up north moving here to Paradise. So the property appraiser is a friend of mine, and he told me the unofficial number is going to be significant. The official number, you'll find out, like he said, I think it's July 1st, but we're looking at double-digit increases in property values, and that's significant for this city.
Yeah,
and that says nothing of the new construction.
Yeah, I hear you, but you know about the Save Our Homes 3% cap. I mean, so even if the property values go up 80%, I can still only capture a 3% increase on the home. So, I mean, not commercial.
Right.
So I'm not, even with a banner year, still got to look at the overall.
No doubt, and that's why we're here in early June having this discussion.
That's right.
To pave the way for what I hope will be a fruitful final outcome for everybody. To that end, there's a few other wage provisions that I've got. I just worked down the list there. 30.2, And Jim, I know you weren't here yet then, but some of these guys that have been around a while can tell you the outside experience pay was a huge factor for this agency. You were able to get some hires in the 2000s decade that you probably would not have otherwise gotten. They would have went to another nearby city when they moved here from wherever, but for getting hired at 5% more or 10% more based on their experience. And then it went away, and nobody knows the exact date that it went away, but I'm assuming it is tied to the recession, because it seems like we have a number of people who were hired prior to 2010 that had outside experience from another agency and got a bump in pay, 5% or 10%. And then it seemed to stop. And you've got a number of people hired since then who did not get that. It was never offered. It just was a policy decision that probably happened by your predecessor and a long ago chief at the time to figure out that this was not something they wanted to do anymore. Well, we think, given the challenges, as I've already mentioned, in recruiting and retaining right now, this would be something that would give the chief a big leg up in hiring if he had that ability to go 5%, 10% above starting pay, based on the number of years you have outside in previous law enforcement experience. So I put some numbers to that. If you've got at least 2 years, it would be a 5% increase. And if you've got more than 5 years, it's another 5% increase that the chief would have the ability to offer new hires. And obviously, there's, it might be a little tricky, but I'm sure because you're a capable man, you can figure it out. Going back to what I believe is about 2011, 2012, when this process stopped, and trying to make those people whole. I'm sorry, not whole. Give them the appropriate. If they came here with 2 years to 5 years, give them 5% bump. If they came here with more than 5 years, give them a 10% bump. Not retroactive, but starting with the new contract.
So it's conceivable, not necessarily we do 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. It's conceivable that somebody who's worked at Port Orange for 2 years could come in making more than an officer that's been here 2 years.
Well,
unless we're doing the 5, 5.
Actually, I would argue that that's not the case, because
No.
we had the 7 and 7 the last 2 years.
No, I'm talking okay, so.
They wouldn't, somebody who's been here 2 years now.
The 4 in April and the 4 in
Right.
April, so arguably they would be, what's that, 8%.
Right there.
But if they come in now.
Right, because you would start in October by 3%, right? So,
Yeah.
okay. Well, that's a detail
Whatever.
we can
So
figure
we'll
out
look at
too.
it, yeah. So-
Conceptually, though, I think it's
Yeah.
more, and this goes back to some conversations I've had with the chief. There are people who would come back right now, and they don't want to start over. People who have actually left, and they know if they come back, they're coming in at ground zero. So, I think it's
So what would be more favorable? And so what's, I don't know, 5%, what is that, $2,000 extra? Let's see, if your base pays 40,000
Right.
at the
Right.
start, so 2,000. Would, we've talked about this, we've even done the research a few years back as a way to try to look at, quite honestly, stealing from other agencies. Like, hey, you come work for us, we'll give you a signing bonus. Like, here's the rate of pay, but we'll give you a one-time signing bonus of whatever that amount is. And if we're talking about, 5% above the minimum of the range, it's only $2,000. If they got a $2,000 signing bonus or I don't know, for like a $5,000 signing bonus, that obviously makes up for time.
Well, that's where I think, it's all how you want to craft this, but we think that, and yeah, this is what other agencies are doing now to poach your officers, so it's only fair you do the same to them. But, a signing bonus is a one-time shot in the arm, $2,000, $5,000, whatever you want to call it. This would be something that they keep in their pay. So over the time that they be here, it's much more valuable to come in with an actual bump in pay, which is what I think attracted. I can think of a couple of officers right off the top of my head that chose to come here 12, 13, 14 years ago, for example, because of that incentive. One of them was a sergeant in North Carolina. Could have gone almost anywhere in this area. He had a family here. He chose to come back here, move here, and wanted to go back to work. And could have gone anywhere. And he picked here specifically because of that, is what I was told. And then there are other stories like that too. And I think this would give the chief the ability to, and the captain overseeing admin and all, to be able to talk to some of these people that have left maybe and say, hey, we understand, maybe you're thinking about coming back, but man, coming back to base pay doesn't work for you. This is what we can do.
All right.
And then the last one on the wage article here is longevity pay. And I think that speaks to the same theme. I won't beat the dead horse here on keeping people. You've lost a lot of folks that are 2-3 years in here and jump to another agency. If you had some sort of benchmark, and for the purposes of our first discussion here, I've given you the years of 3, 5, 7, 10, and 12. That when you hit each of those years, you get a 5% raise on your hire date. Notwithstanding anything that's negotiated for across the board wages, but just in terms of, hey, I'm at 2.5 years, I've got this offer from Seminole County, but I know when I get to 3 years here, I've got an extra 5% plus whatever raise that we've bargained for. Same again, when I get to 4.5 years, I'm thinking about leaving, well, I got another 5% coming. Those are our numbers. I put them together based on just trying to give you guys as many tools in that toolbox to help keep people here. And it's a recruitment issue, but it's also a retention issue. With good people who leave, maybe they get burned out on the job altogether, they get a better offer from another agency. This type of progress on wages, I think, is what is going to help keep people here.
So where you fall in when we're, instead of, basically if you held down a spot for 3, 5, 7, 10, 12, and you get these additional, 5% increase, where it's a, we'll call it merit-based, maybe, and not necessarily performance-based, but I've seen programs out there where you got a, you're starting police officer, and then after X, you become a senior police officer, and after X, you become the master police officer, which instead of just saying, I've been here 3 years, give me my money, it's like you have to meet a certain criteria to be considered a senior police officer, and then a master police officer, or whatever down the road. Like this is years ago, programs like this being out there in lieu of like the corporal's, rank, if you will, whether that's an assignment or rank, I don't know.
Yeah, there are places that do that, and for discussion purposes here, I don't know that that's not a unworkable idea. I think it's all the devil's in the details, maybe, how you exactly specify what those requirements are going to be.
But rather than just sheer, I've made it 3 years, where some might not even really, I'm not saying we have any better doing this, but, clocking in, clocking out, doing the time, they got their, they made the 3 years, then they get rewarded with 5% because they've made it 3 years. But rather than just, and I'm not saying I'm rejecting that, we would certainly put some numbers to a longevity program. I mean, that's probably what most, if there's a longevity issue in there, it's usually just based on years of service and really nothing else. But is there a way that, you attain a certain level of cert, like in the fire side, they have the Fire Officer 1, Fire Officer 2, and Fire Officer 3 certification programs. Once they do that, they get a certain amount of money. It's not big money as of right now, but once you get stuff in the contract, that we can start expanding what those incentives mean. But rather than just being on the department for X years, you've gone above and beyond, and maybe that you have to serve on a CST or a POP or a SWAT, or like you have provided extra service, so you should get extra dough and recognition for that, whether it's designated as a senior or a master or whatever down the road. So we'll certainly look at that, understanding that, you know, the theme of today is recruiting and retaining in a horrific world right now where it's not super popular to be a police officer, right? I mean, that's what we're dealing with. Who's hauling ass from the profession altogether? And then how do I get the good ones to stay or good ones to go, yeah, I'm still gonna go into that field.
Well, specifically come here, because
Well, of
every
course, right?
city has the same need for
Yeah.
law enforcement, every
Right.
county. So you're competing for less of a candidate pool too. So,
Well, listen, and, you know, back in the good old days, bad old days, but now I look at it, you know, when I'm across the table from smaller jurisdictions that don't have the crime and the tough areas to deal with, I mean, this job's real, right? This is real here. I can't even with a straight face in Daytona Beach go, what are you helping little old ladies across the street, like in River County?
whole
I mean,
different
it's
ball
like,
wax here.
you get a guy that's speeding down the highway every now and then, he might be a bad guy from another area, so I don't want to minimize anybody's service in law enforcement, because any traffic stop could be a bad one, right? So I'm not trying to minimize that, but when you look at what you guys deal with on a daily basis, that matters. Like if I'm in the academy, you know, maybe I'm thinking, hey, Port Orange don't look so bad. Ormond doesn't look so bad, because I won't have to deal with the monster trucks that are gonna be here this weekend. I mean, that gets some spillover or whatever, but just, we've got everything, right? We got all the gangs that anybody could ever want, we've got all the big events that anybody would want. So I think we also recognize that we have to figure out ways to recruit and retain police officers as well. So we'll certainly put some numbers to a longevity type program, and I imagine one of our proposals will either include something, so we'll definitely take that into consideration.
Right, and like I said, those are just the numbers that were kicked around, and I sort of had to take a combination of everything all the marching orders I was given from membership to come up with something. Sure, everyone had different numbers, different percentages, different year benchmarks. I put together sort of a combination of it all for you, and we're certainly willing to talk about it.
Mr. Sexton,
Yes.
there is not one officer here that's gonna be able to clock in, clock out, and just ride the time. They're coming in and they're working.
I hear you.
It's.
Yeah, I meant no disrespect by that, in
But
case
for
anybody was
12 hours.
But that's why I just said what I said, because I understand Daytona Beach is not like some of our surrounding jurisdictions.
It's totally.
3 times busier.
Yeah, we
Without
are.
a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, county's much more area, we're not that far behind on the boards. I mean, we stay head to head with them. And they have huge area compared to us. But officers come in and they work from the minute they walk in to the minute they go home. Sometimes stay late.
So if that came off as offensive.
No,
or
I
insensitive,
just want
to make sure.
Actually,
that's-
I think Ryan was just sort of augmenting your point on that, but yeah, it is a case.
They're not riding, they're not coming in, clocking in, and sitting over in the zone, tucked in a corner.
And it's funny, I just talked the other day with an officer who retired from here and is now working somewhere else, and it was a culture shock to go somewhere where you're not running call shift. And it was kind of like, wow, I've never experienced this before. It really is unique what you have here, at least in terms of, like you said, the surrounding area. Sure, you get over to Orlando, other big cities, you're gonna have the same
Right,
type of
similar,
workload.
right.
But in this, East Central Florida region, there's no one else to compare us to.
Yeah, we're a small city with big city problems. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, we keep saying our population's 65,000. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
We're 150 on a daily
On a
grind.
Tuesday night, you might be
When
65,000.
NASCAR's in town, I mean, you just throw $250,000 on practically. And then typically our bike, St. Patty, and spring break are the trifecta, right? Like there's always lunacy during that week, because you get the trifecta, man. You got everybody who's Irish for a day, you got every spring breaker in town, and we're dealing with the bike. So,
We did have, a gentleman that used to work for us, he actually retired from Detroit, came down here, and he said, if I wanted to run call to call to call, he was out of his state up in Detroit.
Yeah, right, I mean, for real, right, I mean.
He's now in Ponce Inlet doing his retirement gig.
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
but
Driving around
That,
looking for
that gives you some type of perspective.
No, without a doubt.
Detroit to Daytona Beach, I mean, it's,
So, and I think, you know, listen, I'm not gonna speak for the commission, but I think you've heard them over the past, certainly over the past several months, coming out. They're very supportive of the police department. They're complimentary toward our police department. And, you know, I think it translates to dollars at the end of the day. But we'll, you know, again, so in case I came off like, hey, this
No, no.
much is clocking in,
Don't-
I don't mean that at all.
no.
I think you're talking about, there are places where you can kind of do that. Here, it's, yeah.
Yeah, so again, and get back to the longevity, we'll certainly put some numbers on that and see if there's some type of counter or.
I think there's a way.
Sure.
And we've always had a good back and forth in the past, I'm sure we can go on the same.
All right.
31, you've seen this, you've heard this record before, I know. Still looking to get 5% for CST and training. Those are the last remaining full-time assignments.
I think we just added those, right? I think they just got it in this contract. What's the CST just got the stipend?
They get the weekly pay.
Right,
$20
I think
a
that
week.
happened just in this
Right.
agreement.
They are still the last two holdouts that work a non-patrol schedule, that don't get their built-in overtime like patrol does, and have to work a different schedule. So they both have a specialty. One is to train and to recruit and to develop your new hires. The other is to do what's often a lot of dirty work and warrant work and things that not everyone's willing to do. So,
What's the training? Like, training does get the 5% stipend.
no, they get the $20 a week too.
Okay.
Yeah. And those are your full-time, not your FTOs, your full-time training unit officers.
Yeah,
Which I think
Joe.
you're 4 of, maybe 5 at the start.
Yep, you're right. I apologize for that. So the code and training and CST are the last of the group.
Well,
that-
code's one person, right? There's still even a code.
I don't even
There's
know
one,
who
yeah,
it is.
there's one code that's,
Is there currently a liaison
Yes.
now?
Yes. Yeah.
Who is on it?
of course, what's your name?
Yeah, so for purposes of this, I should have included that too. It is just one person, but I forgot. Those are the last 3 assignments you can have in the agency that take you off patrol.
Go ahead, right, so that's the issue, right? It's no
You lose your
longer on
built-in
the
overtime.
42.
Right.
You're now on a 40.
40-hour schedule.
So we throw, you know, the stipend at you for the week. But. if-
Which this would be in lieu of that, so the stipend
No,
would
of
go
course,
away for
right.
those units and then
Right.
you get 5%.
Right. Just off the top of the head, do you know what kind of overtime somebody on CST would get